Hello, everyone. Welcome to Serious Writer Club here on June, or this, I almost said June, January 24th, 2024. We have a special guest today. It's Tim Shoemaker. Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Kyle.
And Tim is actually a friend of mine. He's a client. And I like to, I don't know what we call it, but Tim is definitely one of the writers. He's a rarity, maybe like a unicorn. I guess you're a unicorn, Tim. So Tim writes both fiction and nonfiction and is published in both, and he writes for different age categories. So not all of his books are written to the same audience. He's got middle grade, young adult, and books for adults. And so it's exciting to talk with Tim because if you write it, Tim probably writes that genre to some degree, maybe not the subgenre you write. And so he's a great person to not only listen to and hear from, but get advice from. Tim's a regular speaker at writers conferences and a speaker in and of himself at a lot of schools over the years and events. And I've seen Tim speak, and it's a joy. It really is a joy. The first time I saw you, Tim, was I think Colorado, and you were
Oh,
on a stage, and it was you were swinging a bowling ball. It was either Colorado or Pennsylvania. You were swinging a giant bowling ball at one of the attendees' heads with them blindfolded. So they put the blindfold on, and Tim picks up this giant bowling ball and like he measures it out to the person's face to hit him, and then they put the blindfold on. He pulls it back, and it was a really great example. I'm not going to get into it all. They have to come watch us speak sometime if they want to know about it. But I will never forget that because like he's going to crush this person's face on this stage, and he didn't. Of course, he probably wouldn't be still speaking if he did.
no,
And
that's
it
really,
was really just a great example. And that's one of the exciting things about Tim's not only an author, but he's a speaker. He's a great guy. And I know that Tim, you're passionate about authors. It's one of the reasons we asked you to come on and share today. So, Tim, why don't you take a second and just tell us about some of the books you have published? You've been publishing for a while. And so, some of the books you published in the past, some of your current books that you have out, and that way we can get a kind of fuller grasp of what you write, and maybe that'll help people get an idea of maybe some questions they can ask to you, and then we'll get into some of the tips you brought for us today, and then kind of open it up if people have questions at the end. How's that sound?
that sounds great. Well, some of the things I started out with the fiction. The first fiction I got published, Kyle, was with Focus on the Family Clubhouse magazine. So, writing short stories for them, and that was great. Also, I had some devotionals for parents. So, it was ways to teach their kids about God in ways where they'd listen. So it was, yeah, those object lessons, crazy activity type of things, a number of books of those. And then there was a middle grade series, the Code of Silence series with Zonder kids. And that went, really, really well. And so then after there's been more devotional books, there's been a book for dads and husbands, and then this current series that we're just finishing up with Focus on the Family in Tyndale, which is YA, mystery, adventure, suspense, that type of thing. And I know it sounds like maybe I'm all over the board, but there's a common denominator, and that's the kids. I love these kids. And so sometimes the best way to help the kids, certain projects, it's about helping the parents to be a better parent or to reach their kids better. So it's still always about the kids. And I want to give them
Right.
great stories to read. So
Well, and we can't forget your Ravel series. Your books out with Ravel.
yeah,
Can you
that's
tell them a
right.
little bit about those books that you've done?
Yeah, the that's that's those are titled The Very Best Hands-On Kind of Dangerous Family Devotions. And we've got volume 1 and 2, and 3 comes out in the spring. And so each of those have 52 activities, object lessons, things like that you can do with your kids. So, everything from electrocuting pickles and blowing things up in the microwave, and little outings that are a little more tame than that, and stuff like that. But these are ways that we can teach lessons to our kids in ways they just never forget. And it's really so much about how Jesus taught. He was
Right.
very visual. We think of him as going from town to town doing miracles, but he was going from town to town really doing object lessons. And
Right.
here's a guy, he's lame, and now he's not. What did we learn? And so it's really kind of using that pattern, and that's been really great fun.
So that's great. So you currently are working on new stuff. So I mean, I know this because we're shopping it. And it was great. Like send his Tim stuff out. He's a successful author in multiple different genres. People know him as a speaker and they've seen him speaking at these events. And I mean, it's hard to not know Tim because when you see someone swinging a bowling ball at someone's head, they kind of stick out in everyone's mind. You're like, yeah, I know Tim Shoemaker. And when I mention you to people, that's what they say. Oh, yeah, I've heard Tim Shoemaker speak. He's a great speaker. So it is kind of easy to pitch Tim to people when he's so active in the industry, and so it's great to work with him and see his excitement for what he's doing, and not really he's willing to take a risk. I don't know if you didn't put the bowling ball thing in your hands-on devotions, did you?
You know what? I don't think I did.
I don't think it was in there. I don't remember it
There were
being there.
some that were just too aggressive for
Yeah,
them.
too. I think that might have ticked off Ravel's insurance policy issues with
Yeah,
their contract,
right,
but
right, right.
But
Uh,
and so Tim, you being that you write all these different things, you get a different perspective because you're not just a fiction writer looking at the industry through the fiction lens. You're not just a nonfiction writer looking at the nonfiction lens. You're not just an adult writer who's writing, books for adults to look at that lens or writing for kids. Like you've got this fuller perspective, and yeah, you kind of have your same focus of what you're doing, all those things, and it works really well with what you do because you have this market that you have these books for kids, but you also have adults who buy those books for kids who also want to buy resources for them to kind of get to
mhm.
connect with their kids. And so it really works out well for you. And so you've learned a lot about writing across the genres. And I know you prepared some tips for everyone. So can you share some tips with us as writers to help us be better?
Sure. And we were going to talk about strong starts, how we start out our piece. And I think that first element of it is be sure we're knowing who we're writing to and what they're expecting. So if I'm writing to the parent of a teenager, I'm going to approach that a little bit different than if I'm writing to that teenager. So we want to have that kind of in the back of our mind. Be sure that we don't forget that. We're not writing for our critique group. We're not writing for a contest. We're writing for that audience. And then and I forget who said it, but somebody said a powerful opening greets us like a limp handshake. And I don't know who said it, but they were so right. We've
Oh,
all
I
had
like
that
it.
limp handshake, right? And it kind of creeps us out. I mean, for me, I kind of want to wash my hands afterwards or something. I don't know why that is, but it does give a bad first impression, a limp handshake. And the same thing with our opening line. We want that opening line, opening paragraph to be strong, um, because there's something that God's put on our heart for this book, right? There's something that's going to be buried in there, this nugget of truth, but they're never going to get to it if they don't get past the start. They've got to get involved in our book, so that starts really, really important. So I think,
Can I ask you to spell on that
yeah.
for difference between fiction and nonfiction? I mean, they both need a very powerful hook, we would call it in the industry terms, right? That hook,
Mm-hmm.
that lead sentence, that lead paragraph. Do you find that to be the same for both nonfiction and fiction?
Well, yes, I want to grab them both, for sure. But how I'm going to do it is going to be different. If I'm writing it for the youth, I'm going to use different ways to get them. With the parent, I've got to know what it is that they really want. What's driving them to this book? Why did they pick up this book? Why are they willing to look at it? And it's generally because there's a burning question or issue or concern on their mind. They love their kids. They want to keep them from traps. They want to help their kids. They want them to grow up to love God, whatever it is. And so I want to start appealing to that right away. With nonfiction, Kyle, right? I'm appealing to their logic center. So I'm going to logic with them, and I'm hoping that
Good.
I make a case that will, yeah, that'll make sense to them, and the truth will go from their head to their heart. But with fiction, this isn't about logic at all, right? If I get that reader and I hold them on that first page, and I get them to go to that first chapter, we've got them, and they're not processing that through their logic center. They're processing that through their heart. And so whatever truth it is in that story that I want to get across, I don't have to worry about getting from their head to their heart.
Right.
It's already there. So that's the power of fiction, right? So yeah, so a little different approach when we
That's
have.
awesome. I love your passion. I know you're passionate because I've known you so long, but like it's fun. It's fun to just see. I think for people for the first time meeting you, your passion is what goes on the page. So you love what you do,
Oh, I
and it's
do.
exciting. So, so
Yeah.
that anything you can tell them to, if they have that limp handshake in the beginning
Mm.
of their book, how do they? What's a quick piece of advice to maybe determine whether that is a powerful opening or not?
Okay. So let me give you some things that you're looking for in that first paragraph. And then here's how to figure out if you've got it. Okay. So I looked at any one of these things or a combination. I want to create a question in the reader's mind. Or maybe I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to intrigue them in some way. We're talking about the fiction here, right? I might start with action. I might start with suspense. I might use hyperbole, an exaggerated statement. It might be a little humor or maybe a line of dialogue. Uh, I want to hint at danger, hint at trouble, that something is going to be changing here, right? So we're a little bit mysterious. So those are the things that we want to put in there. And then the question is, how do I know if I've got that or if I've got enough of that? And there was something once that James Scott Bell, I believe it was him that said this, and I loved it. He talked about the ordinary world trap. You know, we've been taught oftentimes, if we've been in this for any length of time, how we're starting out with that ordinary world. And our readers, especially if we're writing for youth or middle grade or whatever, they've got less and less time that they're willing to put up with that until we get out of that ordinary world and we get to something exciting. So um, we need a disturbance. We need a ripple in that pond, something. So so maybe would it be maybe I'll read a couple of can I read a couple of openings,
Yeah,
Kyle? Can
go
we
for
do
it.
that?
Yeah, go for it.
And then we'll talk about how to find this with your work. So this is from Escape from the Everglades. So that's book one in this high water series, and it starts out in Everglades National Park, and it's getting close to sunset. And so we start out this way. Parker Buckman stood on the airboat deck and searched the surface of the water. He didn't actually see any alligators, but they were here, watching, reminding him that he was an intruder in their world. He was pretty sure the gators didn't mind, though. A visitor could become a meal for some lucky alligator in one careless moment. An uneasiness clung to him like the muggy air itself. It worked its way inside and wouldn't let go. He couldn't shake the creepy sense that he shouldn't be in the Everglades today. Okay, so you see what we're doing? We're not giving
That's great.
We've told you nothing really about Parker Buckman. You know, as far as ordinary world, we just know that, okay, for whatever reason, he's here in the Everglades. He's on an airboat. It looks like he's used to doing that. But we're getting you invested. There's this uneasiness that's grabbing him. There you can see some of the things we talked about in that list that we're incorporating some of those right, right into that spot. If we were to the book that's coming out this summer um, into the it'll be, I guess, the summer book five in that starts out this way. It's called Even in Darkness. So jumping into the ocean wasn't like leaping into a pool, except for getting wet. A pool held no nasty surprises. The ocean was full of them. Even here, standing in full wetsuit on the floating dock in the south basin of Rockport Harbor, Parker Buckman felt that moment of hesitation from someplace deep in his brain where survival instinct is king. The part that fired the message and questions at him, diving alone isn't smart. Is this safe? So okay, here's a guy
Yeah.
he's gonna dive in the ocean alone. And already you're saying, no, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And so we're doing some intriguing, and there's more examples. We could do hyperbole or whatever, but you might be showing just a touch of the ordinary world, but you're giving the idea right away. This
Right.
isn't going to be an ordinary day. Something's different this
Right.
time. So how do you find that spot? Here's what I'd recommend. Look at your story, and maybe, you know how it is. Sometimes we can't see with our own story. Maybe you're going to give it to a couple of friends. Don't send them a digital file. Um, Especially, you want to get somebody, how do I say this? This isn't for your writer friends. Okay. This is
Right.
for your target market. So don't worry about your writer friends because everybody's going to look at that a little bit different. But if I'm writing for a young adult, now I'm going to print out maybe my first chapter, maybe my first 3 chapters, if I'm really uncertain, and ask if they would read this. And I want them to have a highlighter. And all I'm asking them to do is one thing. Would you highlight the first place this story grabs you by the collar and won't let you go?
That's good.
That's all I want.
I
Okay.
like that. The highlighter
Yeah.
method.
Right. Right. Now they
Yeah.
highlight. So you're not giving them a digital file and they have to write where it was. No, no, no. They highlight it and you've got it. You get that back. And now here's your job, writer, is maybe that highlighted thing is on chapter, is at the end of chapter 1. Maybe it's chapter 2. Maybe it's on the 3rd page. Wherever it is, you move it up.
Right.
See if you can start with that. So even if it was the 3rd paragraph down, I'm still going to say, can you get that to the first paragraph? I bet you can.
Good. I
Yeah.
did this
So
with an author the other day. They asked me to read their book, and that wasn't until chapter 3 that the book started. And so I hate when I have to do this. I do a lot. I'm like, you got to cut the first 2 chapters out. I love all that stuff. It's good background. Yeah, that's why it's got to go. It's just not. It's not interesting until you get to that 3rd chapter. So it can be brutal sometimes, but I think it's such a good. This is such a good advice. Thank you.
it's a game changer there. And so once they get that, especially if they get that input from a couple of people, okay, that's your challenge. And you're all writers. You can do that. And you slip in those other details that we loved so much, we can slip them in later. The key is, and there's a fine line, okay? The key is with that opening, we want to intrigue them. We want to create questions, but don't confuse them. There's the fine line.
Right.
Questions are okay. Confusion, not okay. So we want to give that. Realize when a reader comes to our book, they come with probably 2 questions, 1 or 2. My job is I want to change those questions that they're coming. So they're going to come to me with one of these 2 questions, maybe both. Will I like this book? Should I buy this book? It's
Right.
somewhere along those lines, right? And now my job in that first paragraph is to change the question. And if I can change the question, I've got them. Okay. And that's simply what's going to happen here? Will he or she make it? If you can get that question switch, boom.
You got them.
You got them.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Because then they're invested in the story. And
that's worth the price of admission right there. Though. This is good. Like, I hope people are writing notes. Like you need to write down the highlighter method, everyone. Print out the first pages and do what Tim said. I'm telling you, it could change everything for you.
Oh, there's so much.
Is important.
It is. And of course, sometime we should come back and we'll talk about the ending, to a satisfying ending, because that would
definitely gonna do another one.
That would be
and
be great.
This works. I mean, I know this works the same in nonfiction. Like that method of giving somebody your first nonfiction chapters, you can do the same. And it's a different. They're looking for a different thing, but they're ultimately looking for when the book really pulls them in. And so it's. I think it's a great advice for both fiction and nonfiction.
It is, because sometimes we get so much introductory comments out there, and it's like, in fact, I've got like what I would call 5 strong start killers. Okay, so you don't want to do this, but they're so commonly done. They were done in the past all the time. But the first one is what I call the zoom in start. You're starting far, you're getting this big, the big picture, and then you move in. If I were to go to a movie example, that would be the old Julie Andrews Sound of Music, which I dutifully resisted for many, many years. But it starts out in the clouds, right? I mean, talk about a zoom in start. Yeah. And then you see the mountaintops and then treetops, and then you see this meadow, and there's Julie Andrews, and she turns around. Okay, that works for that song. I mean,
tell us so much you love Sound of Music.
You know what? I grew to really appreciate it. But that was watching it with my wife, right? So, but it works for that. But we can't do that in our books. A similar one to that, Kyle, would be like what I would call just the description start. Very similar to that, but it's like we're given all the details that we think that they need.
Yeah.
for the story to make sense. And it's like, okay, now we're ready to start the story. We've waited too long.
Right. You lost them.
Yeah, we did. Or similar to that, the background details start. Here's everything you need to know about them, their story. And then we start the story. Again, it's too late. Or the weather start. Now, I'm a sucker. I grew up, if something started out with a dark and stormy night, I'm in.
Right.
Right. As a boy, I love that. We can use the weather to augment what we're doing. We can use it to help create a mood, but we can't rely on that for a strong start. So, we have to be careful with that. And I think the other one that I would say is what I call the dreamy start. And that's literally starting out with a dream sequence. So you've got all this action or something, happening. And then they wake up and they say, that our protagonist is like, oh, it was a dream, or that same dream has come back again. That's so hard to pull off because it's done poorly so often. And most of our readers are going to feel like you tricked them, and they don't want to be tricked again. So now they'll read cautiously. So, so we don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, those are helpful. Thank you. So
For
I
sure.
think that's some good stuff. So tip 2, what you got for tip 2?
Well,
not that one wasn't good.
All
Good.
right.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of combining a bunch of things there,
Oh, they
right?
combined it. Good.
Yeah. So we've combined a bunch of things. The one thing I think I would caution people on is if you're going to have if you're going to have some kind of a the preface, not the preface. See, I'm thinking nonfiction here.
Right.
What is it I want to say? People help me out. You're going to have a prologue, okay? Think really hard before you do a prologue. Make sure that you really, really need it. Because
Publishers hate them. I think
good.
readers love them. Publishers hate them. So
Okay. All right. And readers love them. And here's what often I think, you got this prologue. Usually it's confusing. It's not intriguing. It's confusion. And that's where I really say, be careful, because that's a place that because they're jumping somewhere deep into their story. And then they come back to the normal world afterwards. And I think that sometimes, and I'm going to be just a little bit, sarcastic here, I guess, but it's almost as if we're saying, okay, check out this prologue. You see this action? You see this excitement? I'm telling you, there is some great stuff in this book. Stick with it, even though the story start is really slow.
Right.
We're going to get to some good stuff. No, we don't want to do that. So I would say, if whatever it is you're putting in the prologue is that important, maybe that should be chapter 1. Whatever. Yeah. And then you can timestamp it, change to a different spot, but we don't want to confuse them. So yeah, those are some.
That's great.
Some little things. We can read more samples or something like that if you'd want. And maybe like hyperbole. I mean, my goodness, you can use hyperbole in your story to intrigue them. So here's a little example I wrote. And we're going to start out with a line of dialogue. Need some extra Christmas cash? How about babysitting my kids? Mrs. Jensen's question sounded harmless. I mean, how bad could it be, right? Next time the Jensens ask me to babysit, I hope I have a good excuse not to do it. Maybe I'll just slam my hand in the car door or something. It would be less painful. Okay, and now you're reading that, you're saying, what is it with those Jensen kids? And we're kind of intrigued. We want to know what happened, and we just know that their kids are going to be back, right? So things like that. But all right, so let me just read another example from a book. So this is Easy Target. That was a standalone with Focus on the Family in Tyndale. It says this: Hudson didn't actually hear anyone in his bedroom, but he woke, sensing someone was there. He held his breath and listened. Crickets, cicadas, the usual night sounds drifted through his open window, but something felt off. Dim light filtered in from the hall, enough to know the door was definitely open wider than when he'd gone to bed. Terrific. He wasn't imagining this. Anyway, we don't have to go any farther than that. But
Yeah.
that's the idea is
I want to know why, right? Like, I
right,
think
right.
that's what everybody's like, why is the door open? I mean, that's the perfect start. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, and the thing of it is what I kind of want us to notice is what I didn't say. I didn't describe anything about his room, just that he had a door. you know, especially if I'm writing for YA or middle grade, everybody knows what a bedroom looks like. I don't have to describe that to them.
right.
They're already kind of there. They want to see what's going on. I can add little bits of that description later, but even in the beginning, I don't waste time talking much about the setting. We know where he's at, but we don't have to describe a lot about it.
Right.
Yeah. So there we go.
I mean, that's
That's
great. I mean,
little
you are a
thoughts.
master. You are a master at strong starts to the book. I know this because not only have I read your stuff, but I also know that the editors tell me that they know you're a
Oh,
great writer.
that's
So,
good. That's a good
because
thing.
they've seen your stuff, you've done well. You've got a lot of stuff published, and so the goal is, I mean, one of the reasons why we wanted you to come on is to be able to help other writers who may be stuck. Because I found that, and tell me if you would agree with this or not, Tim. I found that there are people who can write a good plot that it gets lost in the fact they just get lost in the description early on, and that no one ever gets to the good plot, the good story. They don't get to the good characters they develop because they never got over the hump of that of a weak start. And sometimes there's a good book that's being blocked by it's just a poor start that won't let you get past the first few pages. And have you seen writers struggle with, like, they're a great writer, but they just really struggle with that first few pages?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? The fact is, even when we go back to a lot of really great established writers that were writing some years ago and their books are still here and we love them, they started different. They started slower. But that was okay because we're reading a book by so and so. And we, as adults, hey, we'll wait 3 pages. We'll wait 3 chapters sometimes for this story to pick up because we know it's going to because they're a
Right.
great writer.
I
That's
got a good
not,
example of that. I love Ender's Game, and it's the
ah,
most famous best-selling science fiction book of all time. And I had my kids read it because I read it when I was in, like, high
yeah.
school, middle school, and I loved it. I fell in love with this thing, and it is a boring start. My kids hated it.
Ah,
Like, I couldn't get them to read it, and so finally I had to pull out the movie. We watched the movie, and then I got them to listen to the audiobooks. But even when they went to the audiobook, like, this, I hate the start because it's talking. This is a book for middle grade, young adult kids who starts out with fertility issues with mom and dad, and the government's going to force them to have another baby. Nothing of interest to a young
ah,
adult reader, but it
right.
worked in 1980 when he wrote
Mhm.
it, or 85. It doesn't work in 2014 when you have to grab that attention. So even that, you can just see how much in 30 years writing
Yes.
has changed significantly to the point where you've got to get right into it. You got to do the things Tim's saying. You got to get right into it. You got to have the ordinary world. You got to draw people into something's going to take you from that ordinary, and it works in every genre. It doesn't. It's not like this is a romantic suspense thing or a thriller. It can work at everything. You've got to get that story moving as soon as possible to draw people in. So, Tim, I think this is really good advice. It's helpful. I think I like the highlighter method. We probably
Oh,
will title
good.
this Highlighter Method by Tim Shoemaker.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get some surprise results that way. And so sometimes even if I were teaching a class and we were taking more time, I'd read some samples and ask them, okay, where did it first grab you? And if it's not in that first paragraph, and then we move it up, and then I have a rewrite because I kind of know where it's going to grab them, and we move it up. So yeah, that's the idea. And this thing you were just talking about, Kyle, about 1980 and how things were um, started 30, 40 years ago, even by all the greats. This is so there's kind of two categories of people that run into a problem with this. Adults like us that read that and we love that, we have to start different. We have to do it a little different than what they did it. And also another group that has problems with that is teenagers writing, especially if they've come from a homeschool background, because they are so they're so advanced oftentimes in their reading skills, and they've read all these great books, and they love them. They've learned to appreciate them,
Right.
but
But
they
they're
don't
older.
they don't realize
Yep.
that that's not going to relate with the other kids. They've got to write different to get this audience. So it
I did
comes
this
down
recently. I took
to,
a book, a fiction book from a fantasy book from like 30 years ago, and I compared it to one that just released. It's doing really well. And they're significantly different starts. And, we got to be reading. You got to be reading. I think to have a strong start, you have to be reading stuff that's being released in 2023, 2024. You got to see what's coming out. Even if it's not your favorite thing that's coming out, you got to see how these new books are coming out with publishers and being produced, because that's what they're looking for. And if you can master that, you'll have a strong start to the book. So I love it, Tim. Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions. We'll give people a chance to
sure.
ask you some questions. If you got, I know we got one, so I'll go back up to it. And if you got any questions now, whether it's fiction, whether it's nonfiction, whether it's writing to adult audience, writing to a young adult, middle grade audience, I think Tim's your guy to ask a question and let him pour some of his knowledge, because he's got a lot of knowledge built up over the years. Tim, when did you publish your first book? What year?
I think it was, oh my goodness, I want to say it was 1991, maybe
91.
something,
Wow.
something like that. Yeah, it was, and it wasn't what I went to, it wasn't what I pitched, uh, which is crazy, right? I went to a writer's conference and I had this fiction, that was it, everything. I had everything staked on this. And, I didn't even know enough. I'm thinking, I'm talking with an editor, an appointment. I'm thinking that's good. And it didn't even know enough to know that, different publishers, different things that they want. And so, I kind of pitched my idea to them. We don't do that. What else you got? I mean, just like that. I mean,
Right.
I'm
Yeah, it's like I gotta come up
30
with something else.
seconds into my 15-minute
Yeah.
appointment and we're done. And and so that's when, Lord just brought it to mind. The devotions I've been writing for my kids. I struggled as a dad. How do I teach my boys this
Right.
stuff where they're not bored and stuff? So I mentioned that to him. He says, "Oh, send me a few of those."
Yeah.
And anyway, that started.
And that's springboard your whole career, your writing, your speaking. I
Yeah,
mean, it's been
yeah.
awesome to see I mean, I won't tell you what I was doing in 91, but I would have been a target reader for you at that point. But I'm just excited to see how you've continued to write and be part of that journey with you. We have a question for you from earlier. It said, Tim, this is from Josie. Josie's still down in the chat. She said, what is your best marketing advice? How have you found success in sharing your wide genre of books?
Oh boy. Um, for me, it's the speaking. For me, it's the speaking. Uh, so there's things that are going to be so out of your comfort zone. I'm telling you, so out. And so my thing was, with the Lord, yes, I want him to guide me and all this stuff. And my first job usually to say, yes, I'll do that. And ask him to help me. But yes, I don't want to take a job on that he doesn't want me to take. But it was the speaking, it was getting to talk with people. And especially when they're in your target market. And what I think what begins to happen is you begin to understand even that target market even better and better and better. And then your writing is probably getting better and you don't even know it. And so then you've got the stronger writing and you've got so for me again, it was the speaking. It's out meeting the people that are reading it and being excited about it. I used to have a really hard time. If this helps you, I don't know, but with the whole self-promotion thing, it's like I don't want to do that. I mean, scripture's full of this where we don't promote ourselves. He does that. And so officially, God's my PR person. That's been my prayer for a long time. Um, but I can get excited about a project because he helped me with this project. This isn't just my work, right? He gave me the opportunity. He gave me all this stuff. And so I can kind of brag on him. I can be excited about this story or this project because it's all from him. I wouldn't be able to do that. And so now that's sort of just like giving a testimony, isn't it? And
Yeah, I mean, and I would attest that I've seen you and speak, and you're a dynamic speaker. You're fun. It's memorable. I mean, That was what, 2000. I met you in, I think I met you for the first time in Philadelphia in like
Okay.
2014, 2015,
Yes,
and
I think
saw
it
you
was.
speak. And then I saw you again in Right to Publish that year. But like I still remember you getting up there with a bowling ball. And like that kind of thing leaves a lasting impression. It was awesome. It was fun. It was exciting. It was thrilling. And I remember the first time I pitched you to one editor, I said, "Hey, do you know Tim Shoemaker? I think we were at the same conference together in Philadelphia." And she's like, "Oh yeah, I love Tim. Like,
Mhm.
I love going to conferences when he's on the speaking schedule." And I was able to say, "Well, actually, he's going to be in Chicago." And she was excited because she was going to be there too. Now, and I know that that editor would love to publish you because her connection with you first started by seeing you speak at a conference, and it resonated. And she's like, "I can get behind what he's doing." And so she hasn't published yet, but it's just the others even busy publishing with others. But those that does matter. I mean, that is a platform. Your ability to go and speak is a platform. And I think people miss out on just being able to connect that with an audience. And that wasn't a large conference. Just being able to connect with those people can turn people into fans who will then buy your books and read your books and then share those books with others. And if you do that repetitively, whether it's speaking, whether it's through social media posts, whether it's you know, the written medium, the blog post or whatever, then ultimately, I think that's one of the things that people struggle with is getting that connection. But you apply the same principles you did with strong starts to your speaking. Like I think that's also like when you get
Yeah,
on
yeah.
stage, it's not like Tim doesn't get on stage and like, "Oh, I'm Tim. This is who I am." Like Tim gets on stage, it's like a rocket firing out a
All
cannon.
right.
Like the same way you write your strong hooks, you do that with your audience. And I think that people need to take that and apply that in their own speaking and in their own social media posts because it does make a difference.
So, all right. So I'll tell you this, Kyle, and I don't think I've never said anything like this on the air. So, hey,
I love, I
here's what I
love, I
do.
love special stuff.
Okay. So it's not anything bad, but this is what I do. Um, however time I've got to talk. So let's say if I'm talking and I've got 20 minutes, okay, um, I'm going to say I've got to have at least four things. So every 5 minutes, not that I break it every 5 minutes, but I'm going to have something I'm going to start out with, something I'm going to end with. I'm going to have some visuals, object lessons, or stories. I got to have four of them minimum for 20 minutes. If I'm speaking for 30 minutes, I'm going to have minimum six combination of object lesson, visuals, or stories, something to hold their, um, to make sure I bring them back. And here's the thing. Like I'll be at a conference, where they've got let's say I'm at a homeschool convention and I've got the book table up there. And that first night, as people are going by, you're introducing yourself, you're trying to talk about the book, you're saying, you know what, this is not hokey Christian fiction. Uh, it's clean. You don't have to worry about that, but it's not hokey. And it's a tough sell. But after you speak, oh my goodness, it's all different because they've seen your heart, they've seen maybe your passion, and they begin to trust you. They don't get that unless they read your book, but when they hear you, all those things happen. Now they're ready to buy. So, oops,
Yeah,
I
and
don't.
passion's a huge part of it. Like it really is. If you're not passionate about your book, no one else is going to be. I mean, if you're even on, this is just as simple. If I would do like an Instagram reel, if I'm not passionate about my book, who's going to buy it? So,
Mhm.
and so people always tell me when I'm done social media is like, well, you're always really loud. Yeah. I mean, because I'm not excited. Why am I doing this? Like, and I think it's an important part of it to don't forget that your passion needs to convey, what you're doing and why it's worth it. And you do a really good job of that. I think people don't realize that part of your success is because you work really hard at doing those little things well. It just doesn't happen. Like you put the effort in to make sure you think through the details, that you come up with the stories, you come up with the anecdotes, you reevaluate your writing. And when you do that, um, more often than not, it comes back and there's a dividend that pays on it. Because like you see people connect with your book. So I hope people take that away from this, so that if they put that
Mhm.
kind of effort in, um, they'll see a change in the way people connect with their books and be able to have stronger starts and stronger. And then even with your videos, if you're doing video on YouTube, if you're doing a 5-minute video, Tim really clearly said in a 5-minute video, you probably need to have at least one story, one anecdote, one object lesson, something. And usually on social media, you need to have a lot more than you would do on a stage because you need to keep them. They have so many distractions. So you probably need to have two in 5 minutes. And so you can apply those principles in the same way while still talking about your project, your book. And so I hope you guys have the takeaway.
Yeah.
It looks like I'm gonna see if I have any more questions. We have any more questions in the chat? We got some thank yous for being here. Thank you for your encouragement.
Oh,
And
that's
let's
good.
see.
Hey, and
Um,
and thank the Lord, right? I mean, we can't do anything without him, and he's the creative one, so we want to we always make sure we're staying connected there really, really well, and and we have fun with it, right? We want to have fun
right.
with our writing, and I think that shows on the page too.
Well, Tim, I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of close this off, and then we're gonna open up some time for our Patreon members to maybe jump on. And so those of you who are on Patreon can jump on with us and just ask you questions live if they want. If you
Okay.
got a few minutes to do that.
Yeah.
And so thank you all for watching, listening. Well, Tim said he'll come back and do the end of the books. And so we'll take him up on that. We'll get one scheduled and he can talk to you about the end if he's up for it. And I think you realize if Tim's on a docket at a conference, it might be worth going and watching him speak. And if he's in your area, you can go. Your website's timshoemaker.com or no, TV,
Yeah. No, you're right. TimShoemaker.com.
timshoemaker.com. If you go to his website, you can find out where he's going to be, find more of his books. Please go check out his books. I'm telling you, it's worth the read. If you want to see someone who is a master at some of the skill of starting a book, Tim is one. That's why his books jump off. I think he just reading the examples, and he's good at it in fiction and nonfiction. So I encourage you to go pick up a copy of his books. You can get them from him on his website, or I think Amazon. You can go to Amazon and purchase his books, and so take a look at those. And we'll get him back. And so thanks for watching. And those of you who are Patreon clubbers, stay on, and we'll let you have opportunity to connect with Tim. Thank you.
Mm.